is here for you.
Hi, my dear Astro family. Today we are going to be looking at Jupiter-Mercury conjunction. And I wanted to give you some additional insight on that. The reason being is because it is happening on 29 degree. So it's very interesting that Jupiter and Mercury is about or are about to start a new cycle. We call this as a synodic cycle. So the synodic cycle is very similar to like a new moon or a full moon and so forth. So there are certain parts of it. And yeah, they start a new cycle on 29 degree of Gemini. And as soon as they make the conjunction, Mercury is going to move into Cancer and then Jupiter follows. So that's actually very super interesting that we have got this one happening. And I wanted to give you insights how this might be playing out. Now, if you are curious more about weekly energies as well as how it might affect your sign personally, then let me just mention that I've got a membership program, and then you get weekly breakdowns and weekly forecasts each week. So I've started preparing actually next week's weekly forecast, and each sign is about 25 minutes average long. I usually make about 10 to 15 minutes breakdowns, but next week is quite super busy actually. Four asteroids are changing sign. In these videos, I talk about asteroid sign changes as well, not just the four major ones, but the ones that I like or tend to use a little bit more as well. So if you're curious about this, then you might want to join my YouTube program, or you can go on my website and then sign up for the membership program also. Now, let's get going with this Jupiter-Mercury conjunction on 29 degree of Gemini. By the way, the very last conjunction between them two happened 2024 June 4th. So they tend to be meeting approximately once a year. Now, the very last conjunction actually happened on 2 degree of Gemini. And what was very interesting around that time, that we also had a couple of days later a new moon in the sign of Gemini as well. Now, we've got the new moon first, and then the conjunction happens just a little bit later on. So we've got some very similar energies, but the difference is, of course, that last year the conjunction took place at the beginning of the sign. Now it's going to be taking place at the end of the sign. So first of all, let's break this down. Mercury. Mercury is the planet of communication, intellect, logic, learning, short trips, represents your siblings, but really your daily efforts as well, or your daily affairs, or the way you commute around, and so forth. And also shows how you process information, how you talk, how you express yourself, how you connect with your immediate environment. Now, Jupiter is about growth, luck, but it's to do with studying as well, wisdom, higher learning, your belief system, your philosophy, but it gives travel as opportunities as well. And overall, this is just the planet of opportunities. I always like to mention with Jupiter that it's super important that you go after the opportunity. You're going to have to be able to reach out. Otherwise, this is not going to work. Jupiter is a hot and wet planet. So the heat indicates that we're going to have to grasp the opportunity. What Jupiter does in the chart, that it magnifies whatever it touches. Now we've got a conjunction happening between them two, and the conjunction very much about trying to blend the two planets. I would like to mention that Jupiter and Mercury are actually natural enemies. And the reason being is because Mercury rules Gemini and Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and they are opposing signs. So the two planets do not like, they don't get along. And here it's kind of like two rivalry members are kind of like having a bit of a debate, and then they're gonna have to come together, for example, to rescue the same person that they love. This is how you need to be imagining this conjunction. So When Mercury and Jupiter gets together, we are talking about that a lot of talk is happening. We've got a lot of ideas, and these ideas potentially are free, like flowing, like often actually it's kind of like intuitive as well. We have got this urge to study, to share our knowledge with others, to in a way to make a lot of connections. But we can be super motivated as well to write and to speak and so forth. So it represents intellectual growth. Therefore, because Jupiter is the planet of luck, though, wherever it goes, no matter what it's in detriment or fall or whatever we want to call it, it is still bringing you luck. But we're going to have to do it through the lenses of Gemini. So this is about intellectual growth. So therefore, it's a brilliant time to learn something new, to study something new, to kind of dig up a bit of an information as well about what we want to do. And it is also potentially talking to you about that new opportunities can enter your life. However, what we also need to remember that as mentioned earlier, we're going to have to be able to express this energy through the lenses of Gemini. So we're going to have to communicate surely. We're going to have to be able to communicate our ideas with others. We're going to have to be versatile when it comes to those information. We're going to have a lot of curiosity, and we're going to have to be open-minded. Now, the challenge here is that this planet is on 29 degree. And the 29 degree is also known as an energetic degree, or some people call it as the degree of fate. Basically, this is the last degree of the sign. Do I like the degree of fate? Not so much, to be frank. What I tend to say about the 29 degree is that it's a sense of urgency. It feels like that it's kind of like do or die. This is my last chance to get things done so that I am able to move on. Or I have to finish this off, otherwise, I'm unable to start fresh and I'm unable to go on a new path. So that's the kind of like the sense of urgency here. So, therefore, I believe that we're gonna see a lot of kind of like people, for example, booking their holiday tickets because it could feel like that, I don't know, next week the prices will go up, for example. Or this is my last chance to, I don't know, file certain type of documents away because maybe, the deadline is kind of like just coming up and maybe the deadline got cut back a little bit. Because actually, this Jupiter and Mercury conjunction is tightly squaring out of sign, but squaring Saturn as well. And Saturn can represent deadlines. So also this could feel like that, what if I don't apply for this new job, depending on where you are, what house it falls into in your natal chart. But imagine that you want to be applying or updating your CV, and then you can feel like that this is my last chance actually to make a change in my life when it comes to my career. So this is about finalizing something, finalizing your project, finalizing your studies, kind of like putting the last touches on your book as well, so that it can go to the publisher and then we can review it. Something needs to be completed here, a task. I want to end something as well. I don't want to be commuting on a bicycle anymore, for example. So I'm ready to buy a new car, for example. It also shows an element of a turning point in our life as well. So it looks like the way we communicate, the way we process information, or the way we kind of have got an understanding about how the brain functions and so forth are going to be changing quite significantly. This is pretty much telling us that, and when we are talking about this transit, I also would like to mention that this is not only for pretty much like few days, because this is a new cycle. So whenever the 29-degree Gemini or all the mutable signs are going to get activated in your chart, then by other transiting planets, then basically, let's say Mars is going to be on 29 degree of Virgo. in about potentially beginning of August at the end of July. Then Mars reactivates this 29-degree Gemini degree. So whatever goes down around the time when we are planting the seeds, Mars is going to kind of intensify that. Mars is going to make it cutthroat. So I'm going to give you an example. Maybe there is going to be a big piece of news on social media around the 8th of June. And that might be about a plane crash, or because Jupiter can represent the sky and Mercury is something to do with traveling. And then when Mars is around that 29 degree of Virgo, then all of a sudden it's going to become a debate or be find evidence or and stuff like that. So I hope that makes sense. So now going back to this conjunction. So of course we've got Jupiter part of it, which we call as the greater benefic. What you need to understand about Mercury, Mercury is a funny planet. Mercury is kind of like can take on the energy of any planet that it has got in contact with. So okay, Jupiter is standing right next to me, no problem. Then let me act a little bit Jupiterian. But as soon as Jupiter walks away, Mercury has the tendency to do again another agenda because I ran into another planet. So let me pick up the traits of those. Okay. So because Jupiter is the planet of luck and abundance and good fortune, so this indicates somehow that if we make certain type of favorable communications, if we are having important conversations or we are negotiating or we are a little bit more positive when we are talking to someone or sending a text message to someone or sending out an email and so forth, then basically there is the possibility of luck entering your life. This is bringing new learning opportunities. Maybe you get accepted at a school or maybe you have got the last kind of like days to kind of sign up for a course and then it sounds super exciting and then I have to put that down in my calendar so that I don't forget it because the prices will go up a few days after. But also it really feels like with the 29 degree that we are about to get some mental clarity. And we have got that optimism as well. We've got this positive mindset that could really take you really, really far as well. And you are about to complete something most likely in a successful way. But remember, you're going to have the open mindset. Jupiter is encouraging you to have this wider perspective. And with Mercury in Gemini, you know what? It's about um, like making sure that we look at a piece of information from a broader perspective, right? So basically, this is about expanding our world view. Few things to be conscious about because we can easily get the brain overwhelmed. So we've got the 29 degree, which is super intense anyway. And, that sense of urgency that I have to complete something, oh, I'm going to miss the deadline and so forth, can make you overwhelmed. And then you might overlook the details, for example, or, you've got a pile of documents and information right in front of you. And I don't even know how to start with it. Or we can even lose a very important piece of documents as well. So it can make someone a little bit scattered. Okay, Gemini can be scattered anyway, and then Jupiter kind of like just magnifies the energy of that. That's where Saturn comes into the picture, who says, be very realistic. Make sure that you plan things out. Have those ideas, take notes, kind of like prepare a to-do list and make sure that you follow the to-do list. Right. And then it's kind of like this 29 degree is the last minute, kind of lastminute.com website, right? So who tomorrow you can get $100 off of your holiday ticket. So, but it's only tomorrow. So it really feels like that we can rush things because we are running out of time, Saturn. This has to be done, and where does that lead? A lot of mental stress. And often even it can indicate that I want to be making a decision super quickly, which we might regret later on. And also imagine this 29 degree as the degree of loose ends. So often this is kind of like unresolved issues related to the Gemini themes, of course. And you know what? There is a lot of them with Jupiter. And then all of them are demanding your attention at the same time. So even it can affect the physical body as well, especially if it's in the first house, sixth house, or even the eighth or the 12th house. Now, as mentioned earlier, this combination has got a square to Saturn in the sign of Aries. So Saturn, on one hand, is the planet of obstacles, the planet of hurdles, but also it's the planet of reward as well. It's a square, and square would represent frictions, tensions, or adjustments that needs to be made, or a call to act on something. So now with Saturn, when you think about Saturn, the role of Saturn is pretty much about giving you a task. It wants you to do a reality check. It is testing your foundations and it wants you to pretty much grow up. And then if you do so, then it's going to give you a lot of rewards that you can be proud of. So what is the core conflict of Saturn in the sign of Aries? That we want to take action immediately. And I'm trying to take action, but I run into these restrictions, obstacles, walls, and so forth. So this is where Jupiter and Mercury says, use your common sense, make sure that you look at, we're not going to be kind of like break down the wall with a hammer. We're gonna have to look at that wall. Let's look for the weakest spot of it and then attack it there, or just let's get information. Who built this wall? Why is it standing there? Is there a reason for it? And so forth. And then we can start making a decision. The other challenge that could be coming up here is that because Aries is super impatient, sometimes it struggles with authority figures as well. So I'm not going to be asking questions. I can sort this shit out on my own. No one can tell me what to do. It's a little bit of a bossy character there. And that's also a pitfall for that Mercury and Jupiter conjunction, of course, because you might be giving you too many tasks to complete to get to the same piece of information that someone would have been able to give you or someone would have been able to guide you towards. And also, the other challenge with Saturn in Aries is that we might feel blocked from moving forward. We are kind of like a little bit paralyzed. I tend to call Saturn in Aries as the Botox aspect because what we do there is we freeze the muscles. So it's kind of like you are frozen. And of course, often we are frozen due to fears and so forth. So I'm actually afraid to ask questions. I'm afraid to apply for this school and whatever I mentioned to you at the beginning. So it's very interesting because Jupiter is the planet of expansion and Saturn is the planet of restriction. So having all those ideas, but there is somehow a lack of confidence here that we're going to have to be able to work through. And, Aries is pushing the gas pedal and then Saturn is putting the brake on it. So it's kind of like you know how a car goes when, it's kind of like dying, but we are we're trying to restart the engine and so forth. So it again indicates certain type of frustrations. Or imagine that we've got all these impulsive ideas, but the practical implementations of those are potentially might be missing. Right? So with Mercury and Jupiter, we've got a lot of idea, but maybe with Saturn in Aries, we do not know how to kind of start with it. And Saturn in Aries says, make sure that these ideas are super grounded. These are practical, not too far-fetched, right? Is this idea viable? That's going to be a question there. Are you willing to work hard, or is it just a new passion of yours that you like for a couple of days? Because that's not going to work out. And also, it could indicate that you might be struggling to kind of come up with ideas. So, especially if Saturn is in your fifth house, for example, or the Jupiter-Mercury conjunction is in your fifth house, or in the 12th house, then kind of like the muses have left me. And I would also say that with Mercury and Jupiter, the freedom of speech is super important. But with Saturn in the sign of Aries, it's kind of like the self-censorship. So there is an inner voice there talking to you. I'm not good enough. Oh, you know what? It sounds like a good idea, but millions of people are doing it anyway. So what are the chances that I'm going to be able to make something out of it? So, of course, the fear of speaking up, the fear of speaking your mind, the fear actually to find the truth as well. Or simply there could be authority figures who are knocking your ideas down, challenging your ideas. But typically, I would say that Saturn in Aries is the self-imposed limitations. So you're gonna have to start think about how you are imposing all these limitations on yourself. And then, of course, we've got this super optimistic Jupiter and Mercury combo, and then it meets the planet of reality check. So we're gonna have to be really careful whether, that optimism is based on realistic approach or is just something that kind of like came out of our head immediately and we think this is going to change the world, especially with the 29-degree, because it feels like this is our last chance, right? I've got a couple of days to get this done. So, of course, also the other very good thing is that Aries wants to get going. Or good thing, well, maybe it's a challenge as well. But then Saturn creates certain type of delays. And then Gemini wants to talk about it immediately. So let's talk as much as we can. And Saturn says, I don't think it's a good idea to start talking right now. I think we're gonna have to keep it a little bit close to our chest until things are perfect or well thought out. Because just throwing an idea out there, someone could steal it. Someone could do something with it. So let's make sure that this idea is perfect when we are kind of like in the finish line. So there is a lot of good things. And of course, in a way, I'm talking to you about the Jupiter and Saturn square, which we are going to be experiencing on the 15th of June. But surely I'm going to be making a different video about that because there's going to be a lot to mention there, surely. So I would say that you're going to have to ground your ideas a little bit. You're going to have discipline. You're going to have to give structure, shapes, and forms to those ideas. We shouldn't be super optimistic, but we need the optimism as well, of course. And then all those rapid mental explorations that we might be doing, it says that we're going to have to be kind of like sparing our energy, Saturn. We're going to have to be consistent. You cannot study everything on one day and then ignoring your studies for a couple of weeks because there is no point. There needs to be practical applications there. Now, the other aspect that is actually involved in this chart, we've got well, we've got a sextile to Chiron. However, this is a separating sextile. And first of all, um, Chiron is the wounded healer, but it's also about rejection, also about childhood traumas. It represents abandonment. Sometimes it's kind of like feeling outcasted with Chiron as well. So the fear that we might have talked about with Saturn is actually could be connected pretty much to these topics as well. But Chiron shows in our chart where we are meant to be doing certain type of healings. So the healing is coming through communication and learning. So of course we've got the desire to communicate, with Saturn potentially are afraid to do so, but Chiron is giving you the opportunity to kind of speak up that I'm entitled to, also that I, in a way, I deserve. Okay. And maybe it gives the desire to a lot of us to learn about, let's say, how the body functions, how the body and the mind are connected, that like the physical body and the mental plane are connected, but we might not be fully aware of that, right? And it looks like that this can give you the chance to heal yourself as well as to heal others. This is about being brave in a way to express those ideas that you've got. It is encouraging you to engage in conversations and dialogues and to listen as well as to speak, to discuss, to negotiate. So Chiron might give us the talent in a way to teach, to write, to speak, to sell yourself as well. Because Gemini is about sales and Aries is, the self. But with Chiron, potentially we might ignore or we might not try to sell ourselves. I think what happens is that this Chiron sextile is the way out of this tension between Saturn and Jupiter, which is building up. And it says, I need to know who I am. I need to have the wisdom. I need to even flip the coin or look at the coin from both ways. And also, we've got another aspect involved here, which I also want to talk about a little bit more. And that's Pallas Atene. We've got a separating trine, but I feel like actually this is more important aspect than the Chiron sextile. Let me tell you why. Actually, before we get to that, I just wanted to mention to you, though, that Jupiter, Mercury, and Chiron sextile also talks to me about luck, of course. And the luck can come from being able to understand the self. It is coming from the fact that you are guided, being able to meet a mentor, signing up on a course like a self-empowerment course, for example, or you just feel empowered to make a change in your life. Or even it could indicate that we're going to have to increase our empathy and we're going to have better quality connections with others. So I think these are somehow um, and maybe don't call yourself broken. Know that you are on a journey of healing. And I think that's also super important. But now let's have a look at this Pallas Atene, because that is super important here. When you look at this chart, all you see is that the Jupiter and Mercury conjunction is on 29 degree, Pallas Atene on 25 degree of Aquarius. But Pallas Atene is stationary. It is about to go retrograde on the following day. And it has got an exact opposition to Mars on 25 degree of Leo. So I would like to break this down for you as well. Of course, Mars is super important here because it's the dispositor of all the Aries energy that we've got. So, of course, in this configuration, we had Saturn and Chiron involved. But of course, we've got Ceres there, we've got Neptune there. Recently, Amor moved into the sign of Aries as well. And then we've got other asteroids too, Cassandra. I've been talking about the Aries archetype the last few weeks quite a lot because we've got more than what you see there. It's not just Saturn and Neptune and Chiron, but we've got a lot of energy going on there. So let's break this down as well. First of all, Pallas Atene is one of the four major asteroids, and it is connected to wisdom, creative thinking, pattern recognitions, but also its strategy, war-related stuff. But she was also the patron of craft as well, and she also represents justice. So, of course, Pallas Athene in the sign of Aquarius, one of the topics that might be popping up is social justice or social injustice. And then Mars is in the picture, who is fighting for something also. So it looks like there is something socially unacceptable that is about to go down, and the nation potentially makes a pride, an ego question out of it. And I can imagine demonstrations with that. Now, Pallas Athene wants to find solution. It wants to create win-win situations. And in the sign of Aquarius, it is trying to find a solution in an innovative way. So we have never used this type of problem solving before. And then I make kind of like an announcement that this is the way how I'm going to be solving this problem. But then Pallas Athene the next day goes a retrograde. So retrogression represents second guessing. We realize that maybe we are not ready for it yet. Maybe we are just realize that there is maybe a little bit of a fault in the system. So I'm going to postpone that. And that could aggravate Mars. Because Mars in the sign of Leo, I was looking forward to it. It's sometimes it's kind of like I must have it type of position as well. I was ready to buy it, and then now they have postponed it. How do they dare doing that? Now, Pallas Athene is stationary. So whenever a planet is stationary, it is kind of like three times more intense. So it is basically what it shows is that the planet looks like from the world view that it is standing there. It's not moving anywhere. Basically, it is going to be changing direction. So it could go from retrograde to direct or from direct to retrograde. It has got a slight difference actually in meanings. I did make a stationary planet webinar before if you want to hear a little bit more about them, but it becomes a super focal point. So it looks like that we had all these strategies. We were about to launch something then, but then we put a stop onto it. Because we need to be revisiting, let's say, our marketing strategies. We need to be rethinking our approach. I mean, with that Mars, imagine that we are ready to attack because you hurt me. But then in the very last minute, I pull out of that scenario because maybe there is additional information needed. We realize that we missed some details and so forth. So we are going to be doing that a little bit later on. Now, of course, this is a trine to Jupiter and Mercury conjunction, and that a trine is meant to be a supportive aspect. So this is talking to us about that we've got this brilliant idea. And of course, we think that this is the greatest idea ever, and potentially we might be ready to kind of like jump right onto it. And Mars is even pushing us. Let's go for it. Yes, that's a great idea. But for some reason, Pallas Athene is going to be um, changing its mind. I mean, as I said, it relates to problem solving, but also Pallas in Aquarius could be really about advocacy as well, because I've already had the experiences. So imagine that you are about to be having a conversation with someone who kind of gave you warning signs, and that could be Saturn. And maybe I did not listen to that person, but maybe there is going to be another person who pops up and then says the same. And that's why potentially we might be guessing things here. But this Pallas Athene exact opposition to Mars, I mean, this is a war zone here. Pallas Athene is the sister of Mars, and they were like when they needed each other, they were always very supportive, but they always had their fight as well. Mars often asked for the help of Pallas because she never lost any type of battle. And obviously, Mars has got a tendency to be super hot-headed, so it easily makes mistakes. And that's where Pallas Athene is coming up and says, no, we made a mistake. You're going to be doing exactly the same crap like you did, for example, last year. And with Mars in Leo, sometimes the problem is that it's hard to accept, hard to put the ego aside. It just wants to express itself. It just wants to lead. It wants to be noticed. It wants to be celebrated. Often it doesn't care at what costs. But Pallas Atene says we cannot make the same mistake. I remember 5 years ago. I remember, 2 years ago, whatever the scenario is. So while Pallas Atene is about strategic action, Mars represents impulsive action. And that's where the core tension comes from with this opposition, right? So I reckon we're going to have to listen to Pallas Atene just because it's stationary and it's about to go retrograde. So if Mars goes ahead with the plan, it looks like we are kind of like having one more enemy, and that's Pallas Atene. Um, because it's gonna go exactly against what it kind of like promised before. And also, Pallas Atene is, in the sign of Aquarius, is very intellectual. So it also feels like it's an intellectual battle. It's the battle of egos. The two minds are somehow clashing. And Gemini is a double-bodied sign as well, and Gemini represents choices. So it also looks like we've got two choices to pick from. We have no clue which one to go with. And of course, it can be mentally a bit straining also. But Pallas Atene retrograde says, no, this idea is not finished. It needs more finesse. So, therefore, again, it reminds us to slow down. How interesting that Saturn is squaring this combination as well, the planet of slowness, right? So we're going to have to start listening to these energies. And potentially Pallas and Saturn together also talks to us about let's do it the right way. And Mars in Leo says, oh, let's do it my way because I'm Frank Sinatra. So the right way or my way? I mean, the my way, sometimes it's shorter, cutting corners, maybe cheating as well. Jupiter and Mercury conjunction, right? A lot of cheats, gossips, and lies could be happening with that. Let's just spread a bit of a lie. That's going to be confusing the enemy, so that's okay. Yeah, that's super good, right? So let's do that. Mars is kind of prompting that. Pallas Athene says, no, we're gonna have to review this. We can come up with a better plan. I'm not accepting it. So there is also, therefore, somehow it's kind of like finding the best solution. And there is this passive aggressive energy around this as well, and that gets projected onto others. And not to mention that it can indicate certain type of conflicts with authorities and someone like imagine a politician, because Aquarius is very political. So we've got this very bold politician who is about to make an announcement, maybe makes the announcement as well. But then, oh, I was just joking. No, I wasn't serious, or that's not how I meant it. So it goes against its own word, because potentially with that Mars in Leo, someone will attack them for saying such thing. I feel like there's a little bit of a discriminative energy around this also. So altogether, I think there's a lot more to mention about the Pallas Athene and the Mars opposition. But it really feels like that there is a meeting about to be happening in the next few weeks, and I think it's gonna go really wrong in the political world because people will not be able to change their perspective, their plans, and they won't be able to put their ego aside. So I think we need to be, but on a personal level, also the same story. Be conscious about your ego and, versus strategy. Just know that your ego is driving now your actions. And therefore, we might be ignoring the strategic part of ourselves. And definitely the impatience is another big one here. Or we can be super assertive. And I do believe that being assertive is actually crucial and important, but we can cross the line. We can become too arrogant with that. We can act out. We can be projecting our anger onto others. We can become super dramatic. And that might not be a good way to kind of create a win-win situation, especially when you are about to be negotiating. And I would also say, because Pallas Atene always went into a battle that she knew she could win. If it was pointless, then she would not even get bothered to go for it. So this is also telling you that you're going to have to be able to learn which fight to pick with Mars. You cannot go into every single fight where potentially you don't have the knowledge, Jupiter and Mercury conjunction. You're going to have to gather the facts, look up the facts, be prepared. Even Saturn says that. And then we can go into that battle. But so therefore you might going into a battle that you are about to lose at the beginning. But with Jupiter and Mercury conjunction, to be frank, you are meant to be winning, but maybe later on, not immediately. So, guys, I think I've given a lot of food for thought with this upcoming Jupiter and Mercury conjunction. It can bring a lot of luck, but we need to be a little bit mindful. I might be making a separate video about the Mars and Pallas Atene opposition because I feel like this is going to be super important coming up. Even Mars is going to be having some very funny configurations coming up in August. So, yeah, I think I'm going to be making a separate video about that opposition. But surely I'm going to be breaking this down for the 12 signs in my upcoming videos. So see you there. Take care. Bye-bye.
Every sign and every house, a journey starts and we allow the universe so vast and true. Astro Viktor, it's here for you.